Welcome, everyone. My name is Annie Wolf. I am the VP of Community Impact here at Solar United Neighbors, and I am excited to welcome you to our Energy Justice 101 webinar today. I will be, we'll get started. So, oops, sorry, here we are. So just a couple of housekeeping things. So please rename yourself in Zoom if your name isn't showing up correctly. Please do that. Throughout the webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, but we are going to save them till the end. So feel free to use the Q&A feature, which you can find at the bottom of your screen in order to ask those questions. Use the chat feature if you want to chat with everybody and show where you're from and things like that. But if you have a question for one of our speakers, please put that in the Q&A button. Feel free to, again, though, post in the chat. We love to see activity there. This webinar is being recorded, and so you will be able to view the recording afterwards. We'll send that out with all the resources and the slide deck tomorrow. And we are doing interpretation for this webinar. So if you would like to instead be in the Spanish room, we'll share the instructions for that in the chat in a second. But if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to click that little globe and move into the Spanish interpretation room. So let's start off. What gives you energy? So in the chat, you can feel free to share your name, your pronouns, as well as your location, and what gives you energy. What brings you here today? What are you excited about? All right, you can feel free to do that throughout the session today. So we'll brief outline of what we're going to cover this afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Why we need energy justice, what is the concept and why it's important. Understanding the elements of a just transition and defining that term if you aren't familiar with it. And then we'll be doing a panel discussion with a number of our Sun staffers who are working on projects to ensure a just transition on the ground in our different states and territories. And we have plenty of speakers today. So we have our wonderful Sun staff, starting off with Yesenia Rivera, who is our VP of Solar Access and Affordability. Diana Eddowes, our Director of Community within that team. David Ortiz, our Program Director for Puerto Rico. Sam Solario, who is our Program Director for our Texas program. And Mariah Williams, our Program Director for our Ohio program. So lots of knowledge here today. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Yesenia.
Thank you, Annie. Hopefully you can hear me. Like Annie said, my name is Yesenia Rivera, and I am the VP of Solar Access and Affordability. And I know we're here to talk about energy justice, but before we do that, we need to talk about the energy system itself so we understand how it's set up and how we got here. Next slide. So traditionally, fossil fuels were extracted from the earth and refined. They need to be transported to a power plant or a gas station or some other location to create electricity and power. And they do this by burning those fossil fuels. When you get to the transformer at the power plants, that's set up to allow the electricity to go and travel efficiently over long distances, because most part, these power plants are away from communities. Unless it's communities of color and vulnerable communities, those tend to have a lot of power plants in them. The electricity reaches the neighborhood transformer, steps up, distributed through lines, carried to homes, and that's how we get our energy system currently, through a centralized grid. And that's part of the problem that we're having is we have these large-scale generation of electricity that's centralized facilities, or known as power plants. And these facilities are typically burning fossil fuels and have the capacity to generate a lot of power, but also generate a lot of pollution and are in a very concentrated area. And like I said, normally they're away from the end users, they're away from most communities because of the high amount of emissions they're producing, but that's not always the case. Next slide. So what is a fossil fuel? A fossil fuel is a carbon compound or hydrocarbon that contains materials such as coal, oil, gas. It's formed naturally in the Earth's crust, and basically remains of prehistoric organisms, and it's a process that occurs within geological formations. This is not a renewable resource, it's a finite resource, but it has been our primary source of energy for centuries, and it's controlled mostly by large multinational companies. These companies profit immensely because of government subsidies, monopoly-like dominance, loose regulations, the ability to influence decision makers that allow them to keep their power. Example, in 2024, Peabody Energy, one of the leading coal producers, had a revenue of $4.2 billion, and that is billion with a B. Next slide. Annie, can you launch the poll? So, which fossil fuel is the largest source of energy in the US? What answers did we get?
They're still coming in. Okay, we've got gas is 100%. Let's see, gas, petroleum. Those are our two winners. Oh, we got a couple of coals in there. Gas is still winning though.
Close. It's actually petroleum. It makes 38% of our energy mix. Gas is a close second at 36. So you weren't that far off. Next slide. So now let's talk about the entities that deliver the electricity to your home, which are the utility companies. Not all electric utilities are the same, but at the core, they're all organizations that deliver electricity to their customers. The origin of the electricity varies. Some utilities generate their own electricity, others purchase electricity on the power market and then deliver it to their clients. All utilities control the rate that you pay for that energy. There are three different types of utilities. We have investor-owned utilities, which is a for-profit company that provides electricity to customers. If you're in New York, that would be Con Edison. Out in California, Pacific Gas and Electric, or in DC, Maryland, you've got Pepco. North Carolina, Duke. So those are some examples of IOUs across the country. They dominate the market and make up 72% of electric customers. PG&E itself in California made a record smashing profit of $2.47 billion in 2024. Now, the next type is a publicly owned utility. That's a nonprofit entity that's owned by the taxpayers, and it's run either as a division of the government, whether it is state or city or municipality, or an independent public utility district. When run by city governments, these utilities are normally known as municipal utilities, or munis for short. You have the Tennessee Valley Authority, you have the Omaha Power District in Nebraska, San Diego Gas and Electric. Those are some types of munis and government-run utilities. And although they're publicly owned, that doesn't mean they're always there for the people. There's still problems, and they don't always put people and customers first. They may always put profits ahead of that. And while investor-owned utilities are regulated by public utility commissions, publicly owned utilities are managed by governing boards or councils. We also have a third type, which is a cooperative utility, also known as an electric co-op. This is a private, not-for-profit provider. The power is owned by the people themselves as a part of a cooperative. You have an example of this is the Great River Energy in Minnesota, the Kit Carson Electric Cooperative in New Mexico. And today, co-ops tend to serve mostly rural areas where investor-owned utilities serve mostly urban centers. Co-ops are governed by elected boards, but it doesn't matter which type of utility you have, which type of utility is servicing your needs. They're all about profit. There are huge profits to be made, and when there's profits of that size, usually you can find corruption attached to it. Many of the governing bodies of these utilities have a revolving door of executives between the oil and gas industry and the utilities. If you're interested in learning more about utility justice, you can read our utility justice playbook, and Tatiana, I believe, is going to put the link in the chat. Next slide. So, as utility and corporate profits go up, So do our energy bills. I know everybody's been feeling it. Those energy bills have been going up steadily. Uh, and that's because utilities control the rate that you pay for your electricity. How many of you have heard the term energy burden before? If you haven't, energy burden is basically the percentage of annual income spent on energy bills in one household. Households with energy burdens above 6 are considered high burden. And those tend to be low to moderate income families, income qualified families that pay a big chunk of their bill, a big chunk of their income goes to pay their utility bill. And there are a few things that affect this energy burden. How much electricity do you use, how efficient your appliances are, and how efficient your home is. If you have an older home, it's likely not efficient and there's leaking energy or heat or takes you more to cool it down. Your income level, the lower your income level, the higher your energy burden, unless you live in a super efficient apartment or home, which tends not to go with that. The price of electricity in your area, even your zip code, plays a role in how much your energy burden is. Highly burdened households are more likely to stay stuck in cycles of poverty because they're forced to choose between energy and other necessities. They have to pick between paying the bills and putting aside some money for a rainy day, putting aside money for a down payment on a house. 1 in 5 households reported reducing or foregoing food or medicine just in order to pay an energy bill. And the average price of electricity is expected to increase by 13% between 2022 and 2025. And we got a map, and Tatiana's going to put the link. And you can see energy burdens were the highest to the lowest according to the income population. Next slide. So, redlining, if you haven't heard of it, it's a practice that our government had during the early 20th century where financial services like mortgages and insurance were denied or limited to residents of a specific neighborhood. They literally redline a neighborhood, and if you were outside that neighborhood, you had a hard time getting access to mortgages, to insurances, to even buying a home. Typically, these neighborhoods were selected based on race or ethnicity of the neighborhood residents. Problem is that we're still feeling the effects of redlining to this day. If you take a map of energy burdens and you impose it on a redlining map, they are going to match. A lot of high energy burden communities with poor housing stock can be traced all the way back to redlining. And again, this is early 20th century, and we're still paying the price of this practice. Um, we're going to put a link in the chat if you want to learn more about redlining and how it impacts energy bills. Feel free to go. Next slide. So another way that redlining is still impacting people today is disinvestment in communities. Again, the communities that were outside that red line were communities that didn't get infrastructure investment, weren't the first in line for upgrades, and especially when it comes to the grid and the utilities. Our grid is even more vulnerable these days during extreme weather events because of climate change. And in some cases, some part of these grids are over 100 years old. They're old pieces of infrastructure. The older they are, the worse they perform, and they are the first to fail in extreme events. And these old pieces of infrastructure tend to be in vulnerable communities and communities of color, and communities they can't afford when the power goes out. Next slide. So another way that our current energy system is impacting communities differently is where the energy infrastructure is sited. According to a study done by Boston University scientists, 91% of people in the US live within a health relevant distance of energy infrastructures. With an average exposure to about 16 pieces of infrastructure, this can be as small as a gas station to as large as a power plant. And there is a lot of infrastructure. If you can guess, do we have another question? No, Diana, no, okay. But if you could take a guess where the highest proportional exposure is, feel free to put it in the chat. And I'll give folks a couple of minutes and some answers. Yeah. And if you haven't guessed, the answer is DC. Virginia, West Virginia is second, New York is third. Over 60% of the census tract in DC are exposed to some sort of infrastructure. And this includes supply chain, extraction through transmission and distribution, where most energy generation is extremely polluting. And who's impacted the most by the siting of energy infrastructure? Next slide. So, the siting of energy infrastructure really stems from large structural issues within our society. Like I said, redlining plays a role in this, but also some of these projects were intentionally and specifically cited in communities, in specifically communities of color, because they thought they were expendable. You can put in that power plant, especially those peaker plants in vulnerable communities and communities of color, because the people building those did not see those communities as communities with power to fight back. The phrase environmental racism was coined by civil rights leader Dr. Benjamin F. Chavez Jr., and he defined it as intentionally siting of polluting and waste facilities in communities primarily populated by African Americans, Latinos, Indigenous people, Asian Americans, and Pacific Islanders, migrants, farm workers, and low income workers. In addition, even to this day, communities that are majority white and wealthy are where investments in new infrastructure are more likely to be made, where environmental laws are more likely to be properly enforced, and where polluters are more likely to be held accountable or kept away entirely. By comparison, the most marginalized communities are routinely treated as areas where highways can be built, waste can be stored, industrial warehouses and facilities can be concentrated, and where natural resources can be readily exploited or destroyed. Next slide. And some example of this include Cancer Alley. This is a stretch of the Mississippi River between New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It is nicknamed Cancer Alley because of the concentration of petrochemical facilities. Since the early 1990s, the residents in predominantly Black neighborhoods have experienced toxic fumes and pollutions from neighboring petrochemical plants that leads to an exponential increase in miscarriages and cancer rates. These residents were promised jobs. They promised construction jobs for each plant. But at the end of the day, only 9% of the full-time workers represent the actual community members, the actual residents from those communities. But they still have to live with all the pollution and the consequences of that pollution. And while all refineries and other plants continue to pollute the land and air and water in Cancer Alley, communities have been trying to fight back against even more development because people keep trying to put more power plants in these communities. In 2022, leaders in the St. James Parish in New Orleans organized to stop two new petrochemical plants from coming into their communities. These court victories stop the projects, but that doesn't mean that those projects are permanently gone. The community has to remain vigilant. The petrochemical companies can be pretty persistent when they want something done, and building those plants there is the cheapest and the highest return of investment for them. Still, the community, their ability to fight back underscores the power of the people when we come together. Next slide. Another example of health-related effects of our fossil fuel system is what's become known as Asthma Alley. This is New York City, in particular the neighborhood of Mott Haven, has some of the worst air pollution levels in the US. And I can testify to this as a fact. Having been born in New York and lived there while I was a kid, I've had asthma since I was 4 years old. That pollution is not a joke. And I'm still dealing with the consequences even after I've moved out. Residents inhale the emissions of 15,000 diesel trucks daily that cross through the neighborhood via 5 highways that surround it, as well as the printing presses of the Wall Street Journal, a parcel depot, sewage works. They're all in the same area. The need for asthma hospitalization are 5 times the national averages and at rate 21 times higher than any other New York City neighborhood. Next slide. So, what did we learn? Large corporations and utilities are profiting from our energy system. Fossil fuels currently dominate that energy system. Our centralized model can cause instability and inequality, and neglect and discrimination have exacerbated energy equities, uh, energy inequities that have caused disproportionate harm to already vulnerable communities. And I'll hand it over to Diane.
Thanks, Yesenia. Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Eddowes, she, her pronouns, the Director of Community Access at SUN. And now that we've gone through the ways in which the energy system is inflicting disproportionate harm on certain communities, we need to talk about how we can address these harms through energy justice. Next slide, please. So energy justice is the goal of achieving equity in both the social and economic participation in the system, while also addressing the harms and remediating the social, economic, and health burdens on those affected. Next slide, please. So to create energy justice, we have to first identify where the benefits and harms of energy systems have been disproportionately allocated, redesign to increase the benefits and decrease the harms, and then reallocate those benefits to make them more equitable. Note the word, though, equitable and not equal. So while renewable energy for all is a nice slogan, it's not exactly what we need. Since our old energy system is so unjust for so many decades, we actually need unequal distribution, more to those who have been harmed to repair from the past, and thoughtfully distribute renewable energy in communities so that they can get the financial and clean energy benefits first. If we don't think about equity, we might repeat the mistakes of the past and reinforce injustice. So this diagram, you may have seen a version of it before. It really describes equity and equality in terms of reallocating boxes to people so that they can see a baseball game. As you can see, if everyone is given the same thing, the short person still can't see, right? So equity is giving everyone what they need to be able to see the game. And we also added the diagram on the left to just emphasize that the reality is some people really start with a lot of advantage and some people start with a disadvantage. So as we move through the diagram, though, equity is very important in sort of righting the wrongs, but it can come with some own complications. If we treat equity as the ultimate end goal, we might start to see those that need more resources as sort of deficient in some way, which is not the case. People who have experienced a system of oppression are actually full of innovative ideas on how to survive and make the world better for everyone. For example, the short person is the most likely to realize, hey, we can just get rid of this fence, then everyone can see. So while equity is critical as we start to change our systems, what we're really shooting for is liberation, tearing down the wall. In terms of energy systems, one major step toward liberation is not just to take a polluting fossil fuel power plant and put it in a wealthy white neighborhood, it's getting rid of the fossil fuel plant, right? Liberation is not just about equally sharing benefits and burdens, it's how do we transform the whole system to eliminate burdens and create benefits. Next slide, please. So how do we take our whole economy and transition it towards these principles of equity and justice and liberation? A group of union workers and environmental justice groups rooted in low income and communities of color came up with the just transition, which is a series of processes and principles that will take us from an extractive economy to a regenerative one. Next slide, please. This diagram really illustrates where we are and how we get there. There is a link that we'll put in the chats if you want to explore this more. On the left, we have the extractive economy that's fueled by consumerism, militarism, top-down control, money, capitalism, and that extractive fossil fuel. On the right, we have our vision for the future, a regenerative economy, one that focuses on caring, ecological well-being, a renewable energy, and top and bottom up control, right? I think the most important thing to take away from this is that this is not just a diagram of energy system. It's a diagram of our whole economy, and that everything is interrelated and interconnected, both on the extractive side, where systems of oppression are feeding off each other, but also in the regenerative side, where different sectors need to come together to make this just transition a reality. Next slide, please. So different components of that regenerative economy. Obviously, renewable energy is an important piece of that. Solar, wind, geothermal, because it causes less harm and it's a renewable source. If you do the next poll and slide, Annie. I want to see if anyone can guess how much of the US energy system is currently powered by renewable energy.
I think it did come up when we did the first poll. So some people did answer. So I'm going to share the results.
Okay, there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, a tie.
A tie. Well, the correct answer is 9%. So if you go to the next slide, um, which, isn't a lot. We have a long way to go. Even though renewable energy makes up more of the majority of the new energy we're creating now, it's still not feeding our system as much as we would like. So a lot of room for growth. Next slide, please. The other thing that we want to see in terms of changing the system, we talked earlier about the centralized system, the sort of one-way street from fossil fuel plants to consumers. We want to have a distributed energy system that has multiple small-scale devices that are contributing energy to the system and back. These can include wind turbines, solar panels, EVs, backup generators. By having a distributed energy system, it's less vulnerable to things like big storms. Um, the distribution is local, and it can provide excess energy when in peak times, like right now, where most of the East Coast is in a heat wave and demand for electricity for ACs is huge. Solar panels on people's roofs can actually help support the grid so that we don't have blackouts and overuse our energy. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the just transition was formed by labor unions. And so having an equitable workforce development piece of this transition is really key. So making sure that there are economic opportunities for those that have been displaced by things like coal plants shutting down, but also giving opportunities to people of color, encouraging diversity in workforce through training programs, making sure that there are opportunities for everyone. Hands-on, technical, programmatic, engineering, all of these jobs can be well-paid, stable jobs. And actually, solar is one of the fastest growing job rate of any industry. Next slide, please. Another really important part of this just transition is energy democracy, where we're shifting away from the corporate centralized fossil fuel economy into one governed by communities and focused on supporting the health and well-being of people and the planet. Getting people to come together to decide where their energy comes from is really key. And Sun is helping making that happen through things like rooftop solar programs, community-led solar programs. And we have a lot of information on our website that we can drop in the chat too if you want to learn more about this energy democracy. The other thing that I have to mention is that policies can be very critical to a just transition. So the Inflation Reduction Act was this amazing piece of legislation passed a few years ago. Is the largest step that Congress ever took to address climate change. It included $370 billion in investment specifically in disadvantaged communities. And it was setting us on a course towards a clean energy transition and just. But this new big bill that has come out recently, a lot of this funding has been clawed back. And it's been pretty devastating to communities that were hopeful to rely on that. Not everything is gone, but it's also scaled back things like the 30% residential solar tax credit. And so there's a lot that we still need to fight for. We're hoping that there will be opportunities for states to fill in some of the policy gaps that the federal government is no longer supporting. It just, again, makes us a reason to focus more on a democratized system of energy, something that's led by the people. And there are a lot of other challenges. I don't want to go into a lot of depth of them. But Sun is really trying to help create access to clean energy. There is an upfront cost to putting solar on your roof. We have income qualified programs at subsidies that can help people own their own systems. We're also facilitating community-led solar projects where people can decide where the project is built and how it's built. We're trying to do we do a lot of education programs just like this one, so people can learn about the energy system and combat some of the misinformation out there from predatory solar companies, from fossil fuel campaigns. There's also a lot of complications in the supply chain right now. A lot of our materials and where things are manufactured or overseas, and tariffs might have a huge impact on that. So there's a lot of challenges, but I think they're not necessarily specific to this industry. And it just, again, next slide, please, is why we need to focus on that community building, that community organizing. We can not only get policies passed, but we can push for more, for better, And and even though we don't have the same budget as maybe the fossil fuel industry does to lobby the government, we have power in numbers if we come together. And so I'm going to pass it now to my colleague David, um, who's going to talk, and him and other colleagues are going to talk about some energy justice wins that they've had in their communities. So, sorry, I didn't see the slides.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Diana. So I am, my name is, I can go ahead and get started, Diana? Awesome. So hi, my name's David Ortiz. I'm the Senior Director for the Sun Puerto Rico program, and I'm based in San Juan. Thank you all for coming today. I'm glad to be here today and to share one of our stories with you. Sun works throughout Puerto Rico, helping people go solar, educating about the benefits of going solar, and protecting the rights of energy consumers. Today, I'll be talking about Centro Buen Pastor, one of our resiliency hubs in Guaynabo, Puerto Rico. Before I get into the story of Centro Buen Pastor, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about what a resiliency center is. And what it is it's a space where communities go during climate events or natural disasters to receive food, shelter, access to clean water, access to energy, storing critical life-saving medicine, or getting other resources which could help reduce the dependence on local government and FEMA, which we've seen is not something that we can always count on over the years when these things happen. Centro Buen Pastor is a nonprofit community space owned by the Catholic Church that provides low-cost or free mental services to low-income families throughout the island, serves as a retreat center for NGOs and local schools, provides connections with green space for students from local schools, and is a retirement home for nuns who have dedicated their lives to service, many of whom are now dependent on life-saving medical equipment. As many may know, Puerto Rico's energy grid is and has been for a very long time extremely fragile. The impacts of Hurricane Irma and Maria led to the loss of over 4,000 lives and made us question the reliability of the grid even more. Because of this and the continued power outages on a weekly and sometimes daily basis, over 140,000 people have gone solar on their own. Currently, over 4,000 people are going solar every month, providing homes with energy stability and security, while also supporting the grid with clean, inexpensive energy to reduce blackouts island-wide and the dependence on imported fossil fuels. It's because of this that the resiliency centers play such a critical role, because they serve as another resource of support for for low-income families who are the most vulnerable, who have access to energy during a critical moment like a climate event or a natural disaster. Our stakeholders are the people of Puerto Rico in general. But for us, projects like the Resiliency Hub of Centro Buen Pastor are a critical way to meet our people's needs. For almost 70 years, Centro Buen Pastor has been building relationships in its surrounding communities, fighting alongside on issues related to the environment, health, education, and the local economy. And they have established a strong partnership with all of these surrounding communities and have built a trust that's unbreakable. It's because of this and the fact that for the nuns living at the center, energy access is a matter of life and death. And that Sun, working together with the Solar Village Project, created a resiliency hub there with the sisters, led specifically by the efforts of Sister Vidalis Melendez, the center's director. Discussions about creating the resiliency hub began to take shape in early 2023. And by May of 2024, the Resiliency Hub was inaugurated. So it moved really fast, and we were glad to play a big role in that. Today, we continue to define that resiliency hub along with the sisters and to develop a resiliency plan for Centro Buen Pastor and its surrounding communities, but are happy to see the benefits already taking shape on a daily basis, protecting the lives of the sisters that are retired that depend on this energy. Um, this community won because the over 2,500 low-income families that make up a good portion of the surrounding communities will now have access to a resiliency hub in the case of a major climate or natural event. They will also now be more resilient, which means more lives will be saved so that we don't have the same results in loss of lives when another hurricane comes through. And now I'd like to pass it on to Sam.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Solario, he, him pronouns. I'm the Texas Program Director here at Solar United Neighbors. And yeah, much like David's talking about the resilience centers, here in Texas, Sun has piloted and developed, innovated a program called the Resilience Hub Home. And so on a smaller scale, and I'll talk about what it means to have a resilience hub home, but a home with solar and batteries where the homeowner has volunteered to let their neighbors into their home in the event of a climate catastrophe or a situation where there's an extended power loss. And so in 2022, Sun got funding from philanthropy group that wanted to explore this pilot idea, and so we developed a program to develop this pilot for the Resilience Hub Home. So in 2021, Winter Storm Uri knocked the power out for millions of Texans across the state, and hundreds of people lost their lives in 2021 there. CenterPoint, one of the big Texas utilities, took a long time to restore power, but it was noted that a lot of the income, like low income neighborhoods, were the ones that were waiting the longest to get their power restored. And there were stories in the news then about some people with generators had power, but yeah, those generators are very expensive. And so it was, you could see the inequality coming through in those stories. And so the next year in 2022, we received a grant to pilot this program. So 20 homes with solar and batteries where the homeowners, income qualified folks too, they would let their neighbors into their home to store their medicines, to cook, to just use their energy. In the event of this blackout. And so we went through the process. We worked with a couple different community partners to select the homes and the participants for this program. And so we started installing from 2022 to 2024 was when we were doing these installs. And yeah, so solar batteries, we were showing the savings that these families would see from the solar as well. But the batteries would be the biggest thing here to have those resilience hub homes. And so in May of 2024, there was there was a hurricane, the derecho, and it knocked power out. And so, in full transparency and in learning our like in developing these programs, we saw some of these batteries fail in May 2024. And so, working with the installer, working with our community partners, we looked into it. Like, why did these batteries fail? How come it didn't work out? And so it was settings with the batteries. We worked with Tesla, who made the power walls that were on these homes, and adjusted the settings and made sure that this wouldn't happen again. So then in July of 2024, Hurricane Beryl came through and knocked power out for millions of people, but the batteries all worked this time. And so, the program's getting better and it became a successful pilot for us. And so that project was through private funding through a grant partner. But now we're also doing solar for all work in Harris County in the same community. So these 20 homes were in Northeast Houston, a low income neighborhood that is very vulnerable to hurricanes and was one of the last neighborhoods to get their power restored during Winter Storm Uri as well. So, these resilience hub homes, it's one small way to really take a step towards a just transition and to have equity in these programs, because solar and batteries, it's a technology that allows us to really approach the energy transition with a lens on equity. And so now, fast forward 2025, we're working Solar for All in Harris County, in Waco, and potentially out here in El Paso. So I'm based in El Paso, Texas. And yeah, so the same pilot that we developed with the private funding, with the hub resilience homes, now we're expanding that out. We're going to do another 30 hub homes in Harris County. And so it's just a beautiful concept of neighbors letting their neighbors into their home in these difficult times, so that they can survive and they can get through these um yeah, like these catastrophic power outage events that are costing lives. But these little resilience hub homes are, yeah, one small step in the right direction. And so we're very optimistic about that, about growing the program as well. And it's part of the creative work that Sun is doing here in Texas. So thank you for your time. I'll pass it along to Mariah.
Well, thanks, Sam and David, for kicking us off with some stories of resilience. I'm going to dive into a little bit of a different topic. So I'm Mariah Williams. I'm the Ohio Program Director. And while I'm based in Columbus, Ohio now, I grew up in the Appalachian region. So I have deep roots and a big spot in my heart for all of our extraction culture communities, as well as those rural lying folks. Ohio, for those who may not have heard of it, was home to one of the largest energy scandals ever in American history. So House Bill 6 was first passed in July of 2019, and that was a scandal led by about $60 million in bribes and vote buyouts by First Energy and some of our other big utilities. They secured the passage of what was dubbed the worst energy policy of the 21st century. And in part, what this helped to pay for and prop up were some power plants that were failing and no longer profitable. And those, in some cases, were not even in Ohio. But Ohioans were on the hook for about $450,000 per day in increased energy costs to pay for these power plants. If you want to learn more about those types of scandal pieces, you can watch. There's a series on HBO. They made The Dark Money Game documentary series that just came out a couple months back, and it dives into all the different parts and pieces of that. But what I want to really talk about today is how we're now working on fixing that. So in January of this year, whenever we started our new General Assembly, both the Senate with Senate Bill 2 and the House with House Bill 15 introduced energy omnibuses. And one of the consistent pieces in both of those was the OVEC. So that's your Ohio Valley Electric Corporation. They were being rolled back. So that was taking back those fees from our power bills. It's going to save money for every single Ohioan every month to not fund those failing power plants that are not even in our state in some cases. So we were working with groups like the Ohio Environmental Council, Citizens Utility Board, Ohio Citizens Action, and the Environmental Law Policy Center to be there daily in a lot of cases at the State House to be pushing through this legislation that would not only, roll back those pieces, but would help to bring about some things that would help us, like protections for consumers and heat mapping, which, unlike what it sounds like it is actually a grid resiliency like checkup. The utilities could do those before, but weren't required to, and they didn't have to share the results, which obviously for transparency purposes is not a good situation. And this new legislation that we did pass, it was voted through in May, will help so that those resiliency projects, those grid mapping situations will have to be shared public information, and all of the utilities have to do them on a consistent basis. So that passed in May, and in August, mid-August, whenever it is actually enacted, we will all stop paying that $450,000 per day that we're sharing our little piece of going forward. But we had a few pieces put out. It wasn't all wins. It wasn't all happy. There were pieces for virtual net metering, which is where you can share energy from one site to another a little bit easier. There were pieces for demand response so that we could help with grid resiliency. And there were pieces for community energy that were pulled out of that legislation. So we've still got some work to do. We're back at the State House. Well, we will be back as soon as they come off of their summer recess, but we're working to make sure that we pass all those pieces of legislation so that we're not just saving people money, but we're making everyday impacts every month to, continue to save you money, make the grid more resilient, and have better distributed energy so that we're not having to transport it from other places in other ways. So, and I think we're moving on to the Q&A now. Is that right, Yesenia? So.
Correct. Thank you, Mariah, David, and Sam, all of you for sharing your stories. I think there's one question in the Q&A. Diana, do you want to answer that one out loud, or you're going to type?
Yeah, I meant to press type and then clicked out loud. So I'll just say, yes, we will be providing this training. We actually have a longer training called an Energy Champions program that we're building out. Right now we have it for New York, but we're trying to build it out for other states as well. So stay tuned. And it's specifically for organizations.
Thank you. And this question is for all three of you, David, Moray, and Sam. How did your win alter the EJ landscape in your region or engage your community even further? Sam, do you want to get us started?
So how did it alter the landscape? I think it's hope for communities that are historically overlooked. It's a program that, brings equity to a system that direly needs it. Yeah, and I saw someone else had a question about getting compensated. I'm all about that. Just compensation. I think that's a big piece of this too, is we have to be compensated for our contribution to the grid. And that's a little off topic, but that's what I'm really thinking about right now is compensation.
Yeah, compensation is a whole another webinar, diving into net metering and the fight against eliminating net metering all over this country. But David, how did it alter the landscape and how do you engage the community?
I think it altered it because really, this is an area, a really, really poor area, right? And it has two areas. It's just a really, really poor area and a really, really wealthy area, which is really interesting. But the poor area obviously is the one that's the most vulnerable and it's the most impacted. And there really weren't any resources for them. Actually, the really rich area is completely closed off, as you can imagine. And so it really left these vulnerable communities even more vulnerable, right, than you can imagine. And so having that relationship with Buen Pastor, having the resiliency hub there, knowing that they could continue to go there, knowing that they could help define what that resiliency hub will do and help shape what that hub will do in the future, has really been an incredibly amazing benefit to the community. And it's been great to see and have great conversations with members of those communities and get their responses about how excited they've been because of that.
All right.
So I think that the passage of our energy omnibus here in the spring was in part maybe a bit of energy liberation, that we moved into that kind of section because it was removing that barrier wall of that additional fee per month from everybody's power bill. So it wasn't just that we were making things a little more equitable for one group. We were removing this barrier that's there for everybody, and making everyone's power bills a little bit more affordable. There's still a long way to go in that, and we need to keep working on it. But it was a little win, that we need to be better at winning our wins sometimes. So we're gonna take that one and enjoy it a bit while we've got it.
Yeah, I think we need to just enjoy the wins. Sometimes we just need to step back and enjoy the wins. Speaking of enjoying the win, what makes you hopeful about the just transition? What gives you hope in this moment?
Well,
You can start. Yeah.
I was gonna say I'll jump back in since I just unmuted. But I would say that what gives me hope is how much momentum we built in the community while we were working on that energy omnibus. Sometimes we think that people aren't paying attention, or that it's something they don't understand, or that they might not be interested in. But we found out that wasn't the case, and we had hundreds of people help write in to their legislators. We had, hundreds of people making phone calls and showing up at the State House with us. And so we're going to build on that momentum and that community support and take forward these other pieces to round out our energy policy and make it a more just transition for everyone that is accessible.
Yeah, I would say what gives me hope is that, solar is getting more accessible as time goes on. I mean, the first solar panels, there were solar panels on the White House in the 1970s, and now the price of solar has come down significantly. The price of batteries is going to come down. And as that happens, the access to these technologies will spread. And I think a shift in what the grid of the future looks like is inevitable. And so we're on the winning side. It's just a matter of time and education.
For me is three things that add up to a fourth. And the three things are that, seeing our staff, both locally and nationally, react to the amazing work that these resiliency hubs are doing in these communities, and how it will benefit them and how it currently benefits them. The nuns at the Resiliency Hub who fill me with energy and grace and love every time I go see them, and they talk to me about the work that they're doing and how the Resiliency Hub is helping in that. Thirdly, the communities that they're serving, and seeing them literally in tears talking to me about their experiences during Hurricane Irma and Maria, and how the hope, like the Resiliency Hub has become this beacon of hope in the community, knowing that, it'll help reduce lives, and all of that together, changing the way people are looking at solar as not this thing that there are doubts about, that we still have questions about, but no, knowing that it's the alternative to staying on the grid, and knowing that it'll get us through on a daily basis, and it'll create security and resiliency. That's what fills my cup.
Thank you, all three of you. I just wanted to add, I know that, Diana mentioned the IRA in majority is no longer here. It got dismantled through the BBB, but that doesn't mean the fight's over. That doesn't mean that we've lost all hope. We are still committed. Sun is very much committed to increasing access to solar, to making sure that this transition is equitable, because at the end of the day, they can try to take away the incentives, they can try to put roadblocks, but this is still happening. We are still going to go solar, we're still going to help people go solar, and we're still going to work to make sure that anybody that wants to go solar can do so regardless of their income level, regardless of their home ownership status. So let's not lose hope. There's still a lot of fight left, and we're going to continue with that fight. I'll hand it over to Annie for our closing remarks. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, Senia. That was powerful. I wish we could end there, but we've got a few more slides. So how can you be a part of the just transition? There's plenty of ways. So a couple of slides here. You can lobby or give testimonial or join a direct action, we send out information about these actions all the time. So if you are not yet on our email list for those, feel free to join at our website, which is solarunitedneighbors.org. We also have opportunities and resources to support you if you do want to meet with your legislators in person to do that lobbying work. You can use smart energy kits and appliances to be more energy efficient. Some of you probably already have those in your homes, and they make a huge difference and also are going to really help push us towards things like virtual distributed power plants and other ways of supplying energy to all of our homes. And you can speak up for communities being impacted by fossil fuel companies. Even if you're not in a fence line or a frontline community, or especially if you're not, your voice is needed. And it's really important for those outside of those communities to advocate on behalf of those who are suffering the most. You can also use state energy advisor tools to see if you qualify for programs. It very much ranges depending on the state that you're in, but you can find some really great incentives and rebates, and not just for yourself, but also to let other people in your area know what's going on. You can go solar on your home or in your community, or even start your own project. So again, visit our website if that's something that you're interested in doing. And then you can also get involved here at Solar United Neighbors. If you navigate to our website, you'll see a Get Involved tab with a bunch of different options, including volunteering. So take a look in there and see what might resonate with you. So next steps for energy justice specifically, and also getting involved with Sun overall. We've got a couple more upcoming events that might be of interest to everyone. We have our Energy Justice Coffee Chat on August 5th. So this is a little bit more of an informal situation. So if you really are resonating with this content and want to learn more, or just talk with people who are interested in energy justice, just like you, feel free to join us. Yesenia and Diana will be there. And so you can ask some deeper questions and really get in on the nitty gritty when it comes to energy justice. We also have a policy and advocacy coffee chat on August 11th. So we're hosting these every couple of months. So if you just want to talk policy, you want to learn about federal policy, ask some questions about what's going on in the state level, understand the bill that just was passed at the beginning of this month, feel free to attend those. Again, a little informal. You get asked some questions. They're generally not a long presentation, and so you can connect with other policy-minded Sun folks. And then you can also attend a lobby training. We do have an evergreen one on our website that you can just view and learn more about lobbying, and we'll continue to have those coming through over the next few months. And then you can also advocate locally in your state. Learn more about what's happening in your state on our website when it comes to solar policy. We have so many resources and to keep you up to date on what's going on. And calling and writing your representatives, even though the bill passed federally, even though a legislative session is not always happening, your elected officials need to hear from you consistently that you support solar power. Keeping that drumbeat, making sure that you are vocal about your support for solar energy and a just transition is key to keeping them paying attention to the fact that their constituents are interested in this. So definitely, just because it's off cycle, or it's not an election year, or there's no big bill happening, that doesn't matter. Calling and reaching out to your representatives and your elected officials about this and about what you care about when it comes to solar energy is key moving forward. So thank you all for taking the time to attend this session today. We really appreciate it. We do have a short survey. If you have a minute to fill it out, I believe Tatiana or Leah will drop it in the chat. You do not have to stay on the webinar in order to fill it out, but just click that link. It will take you to a Google form. We'll also send that to you in the follow-up email. So if you do not have time this afternoon, you can definitely fill that out at your leisure. Like I said, we've recorded this session, and so we'll send the recording, the slide deck, as well as the resources we mentioned tomorrow. But overall, thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you all to our wonderful presenters, and we hope you have a wonderful day.